Okay, well, welcome everyone to another session of Faith Through Lockdown. And on this occasion, we're talking to members of our church family who are either living alone or having to shield during the last year or so. So I'll just let them introduce themselves. Jenny, would you like to go first?
Yeah, I'm Jenny Cox, and I live alone, except for a dog. So that does make a difference.
Yeah. Chris, you're next on my screen. Who knows where you are on your screen, but you're next on my screen.
Fine, I'm Chris. I live alone. I have lived alone for probably 40 years out of my whole life. So living alone is not entirely a new situation.
Okay. Peter.
Hi there. So yeah, I'm single, so I'm used to living alone as well. And actually under lockdown, at the beginning of lockdown, I moved in to form a sort of house bubble with a disabled friend of mine called Sarah.
Okay, and Brian, you just bought a new house fairly just before the pandemic hit?
I have, yes. So I moved into this new place a week before lockdown, the first lockdown happened. So it's been a very interesting experience, kind of the joys and frustrations of home ownership whilst being coupled with the joys and frustrations of lockdown as well.
So what about lockdown highs and lows, Jenny? Where would you start with lockdown highs and lows?
Oh, well, lockdown highs, during the first lockdown, I actually loved it because it was, I expect you all remember, it was the most amazing spring.
Glorious spring, yeah.
Yes, it was what Alan Titchmarsh called the most fatal but glorious spring, most beautiful but fatal spring. So, and I did love that. I didn't start to miss seeing people until really this lockdown 3, because I am a bit of an introvert, and I'm quite sure it's easier for me than it is for an extrovert. So I loved the first lockdown. The lows, I guess, it's been missing some friends this time round, and my family, because often my brother or my sister would come and stay for a couple of days, and of course I haven't been able to do that, and I didn't miss it to start off with, but I am missing that now.
I think many people are finding this third one much harder than either of the two.
It seems long, and of course some days are dreary because it rains and it rains and it rains.
Yeah. Chris, what would your lockdown highs and lows be, do you think?
Yeah, I go with Jenny, that the first one was much easier than this one. And I think the glory of the spring was like nothing else. I was getting up and going to hear the birds sing on the common at dawn, which is not the kind of thing I would normally do, but it was absolutely incredible. And I really felt that I was trespassing on creation. That I had no business to be there. It was too beautiful, and I shouldn't have been intruding on it. So I had some absolutely amazing experiences at that stage, enjoying creation. So yeah, I think, but now that is not the case. Now I don't go out every day. Now I'm too lazy. It's too cold. I'm too miserable. I'm too grumpy. So I stay at home most of the days. I look out of the window and I enjoy what I can see from my window. I enjoy looking at the sky and seeing the cloud formations. I enjoyed watching the snowflakes dancing down the other day, though it was too cold for me to go out and do anything with them. So nature, I think, has been amazing, and it has been so good to have the time to be able to look at nature, to wonder at nature, and not feel I should be doing something else and that I shouldn't be actually taking time out to do that. So that's certainly the pluses. The problems, I think, being on one's own all the time, is that there's actually no one to play with. I haven't anyone to have fun with. Yeah. So if you're two of you, you can play a game. You can play Scrabble. You can do whatever, those sort of things. But if you're one on your own, there's no one to play with, there's no one to talk to, there's no one to make a cup of tea for, or to make you a cup of tea. You just are on your own, and so it becomes a bit subsistence, and
Yeah.
it's very easy to get very selfish.
That's interesting. I think lots of people seem to have retreated much further into themselves in this third lockdown. I think we're really focusing on what's absolutely essential, and I think people are weary and they don't have a lot of energy or time left on the essential. So Brian, what are other highs and lows, would you say?
So I think probably two sides of the same coin, really. It's family and friends. Lockdown has been just the strangest experiences really, that kind of, the fact that we're not able to see our friends and family has meant that I've actually seen a lot more of my friends and family just kind of over Zoom, online and things. I mean, I'm still friends with a bunch of my old school friends from secondary school, and ordinarily we'd see each other once, twice a year at best.
Yeah.
But throughout all of lockdown, we've been meeting weekly to do a quiz together. So I've seen so much more of them than I would ordinarily. Same, I think, with my parents as well, that sort of didn't get to see as much of them as I'd like to in person. But kind of over this year, we've been calling each other kind of so much more. We do a family Zoom call every Sunday and just spend time together. So it's actually kind of reinforced and strengthened a lot of the bonds that probably wouldn't have had it not been for lockdown. But kind of at the same time, I do feel like lockdown it's leading to us to miss out on several kind of significant life events. It's like you're missing out on life. One of my friends sadly passed away last summer, and I was lucky enough to be one of the few who was able to go to his funeral. But just thinking of those who perhaps weren't able to, and I know there's been at least 3 weddings in the last year that have had to be just immediate family only. And also I've got 2 lovely, beautiful little nieces who are just turning 3 and 5, who I've hardly seen, apart from on Zoom, but hardly seen in person in a whole year. And a 2 to 3-year-old grows up a lot in 1 year. And it does feel like lockdown has taken something that is irreplaceable, that you can't get back. It's taking elements of life that just you're not going to get elsewhere. And so yeah, on one hand, been great because it means stronger bonds with family and friends. On the other hand, it's taking things that otherwise you can't get back.
Yeah. Peter, what would your lockdown highs and lows be?
Yeah, well, I resonate with what you said about in nature and reappreciating what nature does for the soul. What Brian says about sort of, well, I guess over Zoom it's kind of like half meeting with people.
Yeah.
Certain key relationships more, but there's a lot of people that you're not seeing and you're missing out on those relationships. I've kept up with my parents, kept up with the 2 families of my godchildren over Zoom. We were able over the summer to have a few meetups in the garden with one of my godchildren who'd recently been born. She was just beginning to take her first steps in the garden as we met up. But there's a lot of missing out of those life events, as Brian says. I mean, so things like that, things like the fact that my father's got kidney failure at the moment, is sort of on the list for having a kidney transplant, and I'm very much sort of not being able to be there for my parents as much as I would like to, other than in this strange sort of half seeing each other but not being able to give each other a hug kind of a way, you know. We've been able to meet up for, like, I think sort of one long weekend after the first lockdown in the last sort of 11-12 months. So that's been a hard thing, but there's been blessings as well. I mean, I've bubbling with Sarah has been great and a real blessing, and I've learned to cook a lot more because I've had more than just one person to cook for. And I took up doing some daily exercise. When this whole thing hit, I thought, right, you've got to approach this like, think of the monks, living like a monk, having a routine every day.
You do look thinner, Peter.
Usefully, yeah. And I thought, right, I'm going to do some exercise, and I took up doing some little YouTube exercise videos every day, and I've dropped about 20 kilograms over the course of the lockdowns. So
done.
You know, that's been a good thing that's come out of it.
So your lockdown low is actually your lockdown high, which is
yeah.
That's amazing.
Approaching life in a bit more sort of systematic. Okay, I'm here in a sort of restricted situation. What can you do to make the best of each day? And yeah.
So Jenny, you were resonating with that structuring of life as well.
Oh yes, definitely. This is more about faith. Is that okay to?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
Go for it.
I mean, definitely. I've always had over the more recent years, since I wasn't working, a rhythm of prayer throughout the day, which of course gets interrupted when something happens. But it hasn't been interrupted very much really over the last year. So that's been enriching, I think. It's definitely been enriching. Not that I think it's not wrong that it gets interrupted by things that happen, but with less interruptions, it's kind of, I don't know quite what the right word is, kind of more enriching.
Did you feel out? Okay.
But it's a rhythm, a bit like Peter was saying about thinking of yourself as being a monk. Well, it'd be quite hard for me to be a monk, but so it's a rhythm of prayer, which is morning, noon, evening, and night, basically.
So consciously weaving the presence of God into the whole of the day.
That's right. Yeah. It's consciously doing it. I think you're right. It's and intentionally involving God in every moment, everything that I do, which sounds very pious. So that's why I'm reluctant to say it. But I know that it's impossible. It's an impossible aim for most people. It's partly because I live alone and because I'm not working.
Yeah. So Peter, how have you been structuring your day? I mean, exercise and cooking, you've mentioned, and you said that you're going in the mornings, you're doing your academic work.
Yes, so I'm still being able to carry on my sort of ministry in apologetics and working as a part-time university lecturer for my Norwegian university college, who actually recently sort of increased my hours and upped how much online teaching I've done. So I've been doing a lot more sitting in front of a computer screen teaching students in Norway during this lockdown. And also I finished a book which just came out, responding to Richard Dawkins' recent book, and I've got a new contract for new books and things. So I've been spending my morning doing the sort of academic work, and then doing lunch, doing a bit of exercise off the videos, doing a bit of social time in the afternoons. I've been very grateful once a week to continue meeting up again over the computer with some members of my church small group, just for sort of catch up and a prayer time and switching of news to everyone, so you kind of feel connected to those people and the wider group still, and praying for each other. So that's sort of a weekly rhythm, and then keeping up again over the computer with my parents and the two families of the godchildren, Every Sunday, we meet up with one of the godchildren's family. For example, they've got 2 kids, and Sarah's godmother to one of the kids, and I'm godfather to the other kid. So we jointly meet up with our godchildren over the interweb. Yeah.
Do you speak Norwegian, Peter?
Fortunately, Norwegians are very good at speaking English.
Oh.
Well, they kind of have to, really, don't they? I think probably. Not many people learn Norwegian as a second language.
No.
Yeah, and I've been able to do quite a lot of recording podcasts for different people's podcasts, or doing taking part in conferences and things online. Every year I take part in something called the European Leadership Forum, which is mainly about training church leadership in the former Iron Curtain countries. And they had to move the whole conference online last year, sort of at the last moment. But they managed to do it. And actually that opened up opportunities, because normally they have a couple of hundred people gather in a hotel in Poland. And they moved the whole thing online and opened it up, and they had hundreds of people from all over the world meeting up online. And I had mentoring meetings with people in Greece and in Africa and in America, and yeah, it was great, really, that we turned a difficulty into an opportunity that way. And I think a lot of people have I mean, the church has been discovering this, I think, as well, about moving services and of one kind or another, meetings of various kinds, online, and how that actually enfranchises constituencies of people who would normally find it difficult to turn up to a church building when life was, in inverted commas, normal. The housebound, the disabled, people who have jobs at awkward times, etc., etc. There's actually a lot of people, I think, this has shown us how to connect with, that even when life returns to normal, it shouldn't actually just return to normal, it should return to a sort of new normal of what we've learned through these times as well.
So Chris and Brian, I mean, how does that talk of a rhythm and a structure resonate with you? Has that been your experience or not?
So I suppose in my particular circumstances, just life hasn't been too different to, I think, what it would be ordinarily, in that especially in the working day, in that being an administrator, everything is just transferred pretty much as it was. You're just working from a different desk, a desk that happens to be in your home. So kind of daily rhythms for me have been similar to what they always have been, and for me, kind of having a daily prayer rhythm has always been quite important. So I try and carve out about sort of half an hour at the beginning of the day just to read a chapter of the Bible and just pray for that day, and thankfully that has kind of remained throughout lockdown. But I think the challenge for me is, outside of those rhythms, I think church attendance and sort of the gatherings of believers, that is for me kind of what helps to sort of energize and spur me onto a different relationship with God outside of the kind of the normal routines. I think routines are important, but I have a particular sort of different ways of meeting with God, some of which aren't being met in my daily rhythms, in my daily routines. So I think a lot of those I miss. But yeah, the daily.
Do you miss the children on Sunday? I miss Groundbreakers dreadfully.
Yes, yeah, things like that. Just the experiences of church that you don't get at home. So yeah, children's work was particularly inspiring. But yeah, other ways of meeting with God outside of the routines, I think I'm missing.
How about you, Chris?
Yeah, if we go right back to the beginning of the whole thing, I was profoundly shocked at the beginning at the fact that actually there was a line through everything that I was involved in, because everything I was involved in was to do with older people. And of course, you can't go into a care home, you can't go and visit an older person, you can't do all of those things. So there was a line through absolutely everything that I would normally have in my calendar. And I struggled a lot with this, but I actually remembered the Methodist Covenant prayer, if people are familiar with this. And this was something which resonated with me. In particular, the line that I was never able to pray before when people tried to use this prayer, let me be employed for you or laid aside for you. Now, I'm always perfectly happy to work for God, to do things. Yes, I like doing things. I like being busy. Yes, I'll do this, I'll do that, I'll do so. But be unemployed for God was a different ball game. And it took me quite a lot of time to actually come to terms with this. Now, you may recall that prior to all of this, we had the Holy Pause. And Mike will recall that I was the angriest person in the church about this, because I said there is no way that we can give up doing these things. And then all of it had gone, everything, absolutely everything. And actually, it was so helpful that we had had that time of that holy pause, because it had actually prepared the way for what then happened, the rug being taken away completely. And so it's a matter of saying, well, actually, I can do nothing. I'm spending all my time doing nothing. So what do I do when I do nothing? I haven't got a family to look after. I haven't got a job. I've got absolutely nothing. And I think coming from this has been a strengthening of prayer. I've done very little Bible study. I have done an awful lot of prayer in varying ways. Now, one of the things is, you say about having a rhythm in the morning. I've never been terribly good at having prayer times in the morning, because I've always had to rush out to work. And, you know, for much of my life, it was a matter of grab a cup of coffee, get in the car and commute to work. So that was not a good time. Now, of course, I don't have any of that. I have all day. So what do I do? So when I get up, the thing that I do is I draw back the curtains and I look out of my window, and I have a bay window, so I can look out in 3 directions as I pull the curtains back. And I've got a chair beside my window, and I can sit there for a little while. And as I sit there, I can watch my neighbours. I can watch my neighbours as they go to work. And I can pray for the people in the houses in my streets. Some of the people I know, some of them I don't know. I know some of their situations, some of them I have no idea at all. But, you know, I look out of my window and I see the single mum and her child as she is going off to work and she is taking her child to leave at school. And I'm looking at that lonely little lad and thinking how sad it must be to be that child who hasn't got any siblings, hasn't got a dad, and he's going to school. And what is his life? So I'm actually investing some time in praying for this child. As I look at the people whom I know, I can pray for them, but also there are the other people who are going up the street. So there's the postman, the bin man, the delivery driver. And so because I've got the time and I'm just sitting, I'm sitting looking out of my window for a substantial part of my day, that has become something which has become much more real. So that has been, I think, a great blessing from this. In terms of other prayers, I would say praying in the middle of the night. I had always had a radio to go to bed and a radio to wake me up, and probably a radio in the middle of the night if I couldn't sleep. And for no particular reason, I stopped doing that. And I found that when I wake up in the middle of the night, God talks to me. And this has increased, I would say, over the last year. But because it is quiet, because I'm not worrying about something else, I haven't got to worry about a job that I've got to do. I haven't got to worry about a timetable. I haven't got an agenda. So there is more time, more quiet, and God's getting through to me a bit more.
So what would you all say is the biggest challenge at the moment? Is it just the duration of this third lockdown, or?
Yeah, it's tempting to kind of rush ahead and start planning for, you know, what am I going to do when it all finishes, and we still really don't know how quickly it's going to finish, or what life is going to get back to over what sort of time period. And when this whole thing started, the verse that kept coming to mind to me was, I've written it down so I get the right verse. It's Matthew 6:34 in particular, when Jesus is talking about, you know, don't worry about tomorrow. And I've always thought that seems to be one of the hardest verses to obey in the Bible.
Yes.
But this whole situation has been a real practice in kind of thinking, okay, I can, you know, I can make some plans for tomorrow, but once I've planned, you know, what is there anything I can actually plan to do about it? Once you've done that, you just have to let go of the things that you're not in control of. And boy, has, you know, this last year brought home to all of us the amount of stuff that we're not in control of. And I think forced me anyway to focus on, okay, well, what am I in control of in terms of, as I say, those rhythms, trying to make the most of each day, saying, what can I actually usefully use this new time that I've been sort of had forced upon me in a way to do, and to do things like, okay, I'm going to do the exercise, I'm going to learn the cooking, I'm going to, you know, get the rhythm of working in the morning and playing in the afternoon, and so on. And what are the relationships that I'm going to focus on trying as much as one can in these strange technological ways, keeping up. But yeah, to kind of focus on each day, and to not worry about tomorrow or next week over those things that well, who knows, and you can't do anything about it, and worrying about it's not actually going to help anyone. So what am I doing?
I found that verse very challenging in the beginning of the year, and I found myself, you know, just coming back to that sense of just have to carry this day's load, not tomorrow's, not next week's, but just carry this day's load. It is so much easier to say than to do, which is the challenge in all preaching. It's very easy to say these things, it's much harder to do them. But yes, Brian, what would you say the biggest challenges?
I think maybe for me it's how to carry on through lockdown without letting anger get on top of me. I think is a key thing. I think just for me in particular, I don't know if you know about Enneagram types, but my Enneagram is one that means that I'm prone to anger, and I think usually meeting up with people, it's a way of kind of reminding me of the good things of the world. You know, get together, have a laugh, and it's just a way of dissipating the anger that normally builds up. But kind of when you're alone in your house by yourself all day, there's nowhere for the anger to go, and it just builds up, it gets stronger and stronger. And I've noticed I've been swearing a lot more this year than I ever have before. And recently I've noticed that's a challenge that's come up to me. It's just telling myself to stop swearing all the time. It's just because there's this just venomous anger that is just building up that doesn't really seem to have anywhere to go. And I remember back when kind of lockdown first started, I was thinking about, okay, how's God going to use this time? And kind of a key question was, how am I going to end this time of lockdown a better person than when I started it? But so far it seems that I don't know if I've become a better person. I definitely have become an angrier one. And so the challenge for me is how to let that anger go, how to trust God, and just sort of live with optimism, I suppose, and a hope for the future, rather than just this building anger that seems to be just weighing in the background.
For those of you who aren't aware, the Enneagram is a way of looking at the personality that has deep Christian roots. It's quite a flexible model of the personality. And what Brian was sharing was his sense of who he is according to that mapping of the personality, which I've certainly been exploring in the last 2.5 years with some of my colleagues, and I found it very insightful. So a good book on that would be The Road Back to You by somebody called Ian Morgan Cron. That's C-R-O-N, The Road Back to You, if you want to learn more about that. Type is Chris.
I've forgotten what the question was.
The biggest challenge.
Oh, challenge. Yeah, I think it's boredom, really. Yeah. I think it's very, very easy just to think, well, one day is like another. What shall I do today? If I can pick the phone up and I can phone somebody, or I can send an email, or I can write a letter or something like that, I get through it. But if I don't, if I'm feeling, low and I can't be bothered, and I go all day and I don't speak a word to anybody, and then I go a second day and I don't bother to speak to anybody, then I know I'm on a downward spiral.
Yeah, I think one of the things I've seen is that people in different situations have probably less insight into the situations of others than maybe at any other time. So if somebody from church was wanting to know how to pray for people in your situation, what would you encourage them to pray for?
I would say don't pray for me. I would say don't pray for me. I would say be the answer to the prayer.
Okay.
Write me a letter, phone me, send me an email. Don't say, oh, she's lonely, I'd better pray for her. Do something about it.
Absolutely.
I'd say don't wonder. I wonder what I can pray for people in that situation that I don't know or understand. Well, get to know or understand the situation. As I say, it's been a boon to me to keep meeting up with members from my church small group once a week, and to swap news and hear news of people that I know through them as well, and therefore to understand those situations and pray a bit for each other in that grouping. So get to know a circle of people a little bit more through the means that you can, and then pray for what you know, and don't worry about all the other people. There's if we have enough circles, we can include everyone, but it's not your job to sort of look after everyone. But if you just look after a few people in some ways, then the job gets done. Yeah. So
it would be to encourage people to reach out and lessen the weight of isolation that can. And also Jesus talking about carry one another's burdens, share. The corollary of that, the sort of flip side of that coin, is that we have a sort of Christian duty to actually share our burdens with some other people, to let some other people into our lives enough that they know what our burdens are, so that they can share them with us. So that it's about a measure of sort of vulnerability in a relationship, as well as just thinking, what have I got to do for other people? Well, one of the things you can do for other people is be vulnerable to them and share yourself with them, and that actually encourages them to do the same. That's how you build a real relationship, even over the internet. No, it's about mutuality, isn't it? That word koinonia, that intense sharing, that it's got to be two-way, hasn't it? Jenny, what would you say? What would you encourage people to pray?
I think I would want people to pray that every day there would be something that feels like a blessing, and that is a blessing, and is a joy. So that to get away from this feeling that every day is the same, that every day there would be a tangible blessing.
Yeah. Brian, what would you encourage people to pray for?
I think perhaps praying into just mental health issues in general would be a really good think it's time. I mean, mental health can affect anybody, but I imagine probably those living alone, especially if they don't have a particularly wide social network around them, just depression creeping in. I've been someone who's suffered from depression for years and years and years, and praise God, I'm going through a pretty good patch at the moment. But when it settles in, it's one of the worst things that you could imagine. Just the bleakness, the hopelessness, and even knowing God in those situations, there is something that just seems to sap any sense of joy out of life from you. And I think just there's this lockdown's probably, especially when we're in January, February, bleak, cold and dark, I just hate to think what is going through a lot of people's heads at the moment. And so just a prayer for some sort of relief from that, a sense of hope, or as Peter said, just kind of an outlet, a social outlet, that we are sharing one another's burdens, that we are not alone, we are a community, and we are in relationship with God as well. So just a reaffirming of that, and a sense of the bleakness and hopelessness lifting would be a good thing to pray into, I think, in general.
I'm sure you're right that there is going to be a higher incidence of mental health issues as a consequence of the last year. I'm sure that's right. So really we're saying we need to pray for all those who are isolated, pray protection for their mental and emotional health, but also be the answer to the prayer in the sense of reaching out to those who might be isolated. And any last thoughts before we wrap up?
Yeah, can I give a couple of positives? Two things to help. I think it helps to sing.
Okay.
So I recommend singing hymns, and I recommend singing your way through the hymn book.
Okay.
This I think is great. And the other thing I recommend is lots of flowers. So if you go to the supermarket, buy yourself a bunch of flowers. Don't wait for somebody else to give you flowers. Buy flowers.
Yeah.
Because if you sit and look at flowers, you may not be able to go out for a walk or whatever because of the weather. But if you can sit and watch a bunch of daffodils unfold or something like that, it lifts your spirits. So my Bible verse, I wanted to find the Bible verse that had both flowers and singing in it.
Okay.
And this is what I found.
The trees
flowers
of the field
appear on the earth. Flowers appear on the earth. The season of singing has come. The cooing of doves is heard in our land.
Okay. There you go. There you go. Well, thank you all. That's been really, really helpful and interesting and stimulating. So thank you. Just a few reflections on that really, really interesting and fun conversation that I had with Brian and Chris, Jenny and Peter. In fact, it was so much fun. I had quite a lot to cut out because we talked a lot longer than the 38 minutes I think we ended up with. The first is, this is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Those words from Psalm 118 came to mind as I watched the conversation back. There were losses, there were real losses, loss of contact with friends and family, the loss of community, the loss of gathering, the loss of purpose, as a line was drawn through everything in her diary, as Chris described it. And yet there were also gains. There was the creating and finding of structure where life was no longer providing it. There was the time and the space to relish God's creation, being able to trespass on creation, as Chris put it, especially in the gift of the incredible spring we enjoyed last year. The ability to find a deeper walk of prayer, whether weaving that through every fiber of life, or even finding God speaking in the middle of the night. So living alone in these lockdown days seems to have been both a burden and a gift, a burden and a gift. A burden of isolation, yes. A burden of being left alone with oneself, yes. whether to cope with anger or with boredom, but also of a gift of an absence of distraction, and the ability to create a space and a structure in which God could be both sought and heard. Even from Jenny, a recognition of this as a privilege that others in busier phases of life, like those homeschooling or working from home, those folk cannot currently share. So it's a burden, it's a gift, and it's even a privilege. So I think our friends showed us an ability to rejoice and be glad even in this day, even in this season of lockdown days where one just seems much like the next. They have been able to rejoice and be glad even in this season with all of its uncertainties and darkness. So just a few questions to finish. First, how have we too been able to rejoice and be glad in the gift of this day, even in this lockdown season? I wonder if for many of us, praise and thanksgiving have honestly dropped off the radar a bit. If you're watching this alone, maybe spend some time writing out some things for which you want to give thanks, even in this day, this season. I know if I'm struggling to pray, sometimes I find that I have to start with thanksgiving. And that if I start with thanksgiving, then the rest of prayer can often start to flow as a consequence. If you're watching this as a group, maybe talk about the losses of lockdown that a number of the folk mentioned, but then also turn to praise and thanksgiving all the same. This is the day that the Lord has made, even this day, and let us rejoice and be glad in it. Second, in the sameness of lockdown days, how have you structured your days? Of course, some people's days are structured for them and life has become frenetic and breathless. But how might we learn from the example of Peter, from Jenny, from Chris, and the ways in which they've structured their days? And third, remember Jenny's saying that we should pray for something every day that feels like a blessing. Pray for something every day that feels like a blessing. So where have you seen God's hand at work recently? How are you, as Peter put it, doing what you can to make the most of each day? How are you praying? Praying for God's blessing to be upon you, to be upon your household and your neighbours at the moment. I think those are the questions that it would be really good to think about. How are we being able to rejoice and be glad in the gift of this day, even in lockdown? How have we structured our days? And how are we praying that each day something that feels like a blessing comes into the lives of those around us or into our own lives? Hope you've enjoyed this first Faith Through Lockdown. Be grateful to receive any feedback, as I've never done anything quite like this before, and every blessing as you continue to pursue God through Lent.